Hey everybody, welcome to Nutri-iQ Radio, where we talk about all things food, fitness, and feeling good. I'm your host, Shaun here, and this week I'm joined by Nutri-iQ founder Jim to talk about the UK government's new obesity strategy, the Better Health campaign, and everything in between. We planned to cover this topic a few weeks back, but Zoom just didn't want to play ball, and it still might not today. If the internet goes down, then we'll just try and chop it together and see what happens.
If it freezes at any point, I'll just shut up and let you talk.
Can we do that in real life?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Jim, do you want to say hello for people who haven't listened to episodes with you, Inks? It's been a while.
So I'm the founder of Nutri-iQ. Like Shaun said there, I've done a couple of podcasts at the start, and then just Shaun's been rolling with it. So I thought I'd drop back in to talk about this topic, because it's quite a big one, really. But I haven't done much research into this. So Shaun, you're gonna obviously lead the conversation, and then my opinion is almost going to be kind of on the fly, as it would be for anyone else finding out this information. So pretty much everything I know about it is what most people probably have just heard from the news and stuff as well.
Yeah, that's, to be honest, pretty much where I was at with it. Like, I knew there was a thing that was happening. I'd started to see the adverts, but all the details of like how much they're planning to do and all the little bits, I had no idea of until I started sort of digging in a little bit. But like you say, it's a big topic. There's a lot to cover. So the way I was thinking we do this is I'll start by giving the listeners a bit of a background or a bit of a refresher in why this obesity strategy is necessary in the first place, even though I'm pretty sure we all probably know. Then we just get right into the details of the plans and what we think of them. So let's get into it. So I thought we'd start with a couple of little stats. So obviously we know that people are gaining weight more and more. We know the rates of obesity are going up and things like that. And it's awful. Like because me and Jim have both been personal trainers for 6 years. And even 6 years ago, when we started doing that, these numbers were lower. And when the people who, trained us into being PTs started, they were lower again. And just watching them creep up year on year, really in the space of 6 years, quite an alarming rate. It makes a kind of sober reading. So I'll just give you a couple. So at the moment, last stat I could find, 63% of the UK population is overweight, which is a large number, and half of them are obese. So basically 30% of the population are obese, 30% are overweight, pretty much. And 1/3 of children leaving primary school now are overweight. And that is the one that gets me along with this next one. And 1 in 5 children leaving primary school is obese. Like, it's mad. Like, it's, like I said, it's sobering just thinking, like if these kids are learning those habits, to be that way at that age, it's going to be so hard. Like, for anyone listening already, like if you're struggling to manage your weight now, you know how hard it is. And it's hard, not because you're bad at it or because it's your fault, because of all the things we're going to get into later in the show. So like I say, we can change it. And that's why this sort of strategy is necessary, because there's so much that goes on, in the world that we live in, that makes us prone to becoming overweight now. It's the environment we live in, it's the culture we've got around food and all of that. Food is so easily accessible, and everywhere you look, you're prompted to eat more food. Food lasts for longer in the fridge, so it's less likely to go to waste. So again, you're then more likely to eat it because it's not gone off. And on the flip side of things, we're prompted to do less and less moving. As much as Nike keeps coming out with new products, or there's new trainers coming out every week, the world we live in is always just saying, sit down, don't worry about it. Like, we'll get you from A to B. You know, we've got cars, buses, trams, trains, escalators, so you don't even need to take the stairs. When you go to the airport, you got that like horizontal escalator. I don't even know what it's called, but it just walks you faster. So you walk a bit less. And I love it because it's really fun. But,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
it's
No
just one
one
of those.
doesn't love that.
Yeah, I know. It's all those things. And, you know, think about your shopping. You know, you don't even need to leave your house to get that food anymore. That's really easily accessible. So when we just bring it back to that, you know, that principle that we always talk about of calorie balance, if you are consuming more calories than your body needs, you'll store those calories, that energy, as body fat. And that's just the way it is. And so if it's easier for those calories to come in and you're less likely to be putting those calories out, you're more likely to store energy as body fat. And that's the nuts and bolts of it. You know, that's the bottom line. So what we're going to look at now then, as we get into the obesity strategy and what it's all about, is how can we change that? You know, what's the government planning to do to sort of change the script on that, to make that sort of high calorie dense, easily overeatable, or what you call hyperpalatable food less accessible or less appealing or less in your face in some cases, as we get to them. You know, how do we get people being more active, more than just saying it's good for you, go do it? You know what I mean? Like, there's got to be incentives.
I think
It's got to be easy to do.
uh, obviously we don't really know where this conversation is going to go, but I've got a feeling that a lot of it is going to be geared towards how do you actually change not the person but the environment. You know, I think I think this is a lot like crime issues. You know, like where you hear a lot about like in specific areas, and really the best way to deal with that is to alter the environment or the opportunities that are there for the people, as opposed to just punishing the people. But that's the way that things are now, is that overweight and obese people are like ostracized for it, like it's their fault.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of what we'll probably talk about today is how do we actually, like you say, make it easier for them, change the environment so that actually their ability to make that choice is more of their own and not just made for them.
Yeah. So like I said, there's lots of strategies or sort of elements of the strategy, the bigger strategy that they're looking at. So what I'll do is I'll give you a quick list of kind of some of the bullet points of what I've got, and then, you know, we'll dig into them a little bit. Treat this as like the contents page of the rest of the conversation. So some of the big things that stand out and that you might have heard being talked about in the news is the Better Health campaign. So that's, you know, the adverts you've started seeing, the NHS app, things like that. The government is looking to expand the services that are available to aid with managing your weight through the NHS. They're planning to get some research done on the traffic light labeling system, which is, you know, the ones you see on the front of the packets where it's give you, if something is a certain percentage of your daily recommended intake for fat, sugar, salt, things like that, it's green, amber, or red on the label on the front. So they think that's quite a good thing, but they want to do a bit of research to find out how good it really is and if it could be better. Hopefully that doesn't mean going over to paste labeling, but we'll talk about that when we get there. Calories on menus. So in bigger restaurants with a certain number of employees there, or chains, things like that, then there will be calories on the menus for them to help if you're trying to manage your weight loss by keeping a track of your calorie intake, which of course is the most direct way to do things. And then linking into that, of course, is the current Eat Out to Help Out campaign that's also going on, which a lot of people are thinking, why would you do both things at the same time? But again, we'll get to that when we get to it. Food promotion and placements of foods that are high in fat, sugar, and salt. So when you go to the shop, the stuff that's at the till is the chocolate, the soft drinks, and all that stuff, which supermarkets put there for a reason, because it's just psychology. and we'll get to why that is later. And then that does bring us back to sort of the families that are less well off, poorer income families, and the accessibility of those foods. And instead of, maybe putting junk food up, why don't you bring the price of whole food down? But we'll talk about that in a minute. And the big one a lot of people have probably heard of is banning junk food ads on TV and online before 9 p.m. And there's a couple of last ones that I couldn't see a lot on. There was just, it said this on the website, but didn't really go into it. There's also going to be a national strategy for disabled people. So it seems to be more like specifically targeted towards people who are disabled in whatever capacity that might be, because maybe on the sort of the active transport side of things, that might be more difficult. And employers as well, which I don't think I've heard of as being something that the government has really pushed on before, employers and businesses promoting or sort of prioritizing, it's probably the better word, the health of their employees and the well-being of their employees, which a lot of companies are, which is good. But now it's going to be sort of a government level thing to push that. So yeah, there's kind of your contents thing. Like you said, there's lots to talk about. I think it'd be really cool to talk about them all as well, just to see kind of where we go. And obviously, anybody listening or watching, as we're talking about all this, like, let us know what you're thinking. If you're listening to a certain topic and you know a lot about it, like, let us know what that is. Like, let us know what let us know what your thoughts are, and you can do that by either dropping an email to the podcast, which is to Shaun at Nutri-iQ.net, and use the subject line podcast. Tell us everything you know. And we're just getting a bit more into using Twitter at the minute as well. So if you're on Twitter and you're listening to the podcast and you think of something as we're talking, pop it in a tweet to at Nutri-iQ official. So let's get into it, yeah?
Yeah, man.
Let's roll. So yeah, first thing then is the Better Health campaign. So you said at the start, you don't know a lot about what's going on. So what have you seen so far of it, basically?
Again, just going back to asking people to send in what they think. It'd be interesting to know what people have heard, because obviously we're in the industry and we've got our ear to the ground in a lot of ways. It'd be interesting just to hear how much our listeners have heard about, if anything, about this, or if they've seen adverts, or if they knew that this app existed. Myself, I had no idea about Better Health. I knew that the Obesity Strategy had been put in place, and a lot of the things you just mentioned I knew, but the Better Health app wasn't one of them. Until we sort of did a little bit of research, because we decided we were going to cover this. So I hadn't heard anything about it. I hadn't seen any of the adverts for it. Since then, I've had a little gander. I've seen sort of an overview of what's in the app, and it looks pretty sort of standard.
Yeah.
Nothing kind of revolutionary. Just really, really standard stuff, like setting goals for yourself, working out your BMR. Yeah. I don't know. I haven't actually downloaded it and looked at it. So how far into it did you get?
So I did that. Well, same as you. I didn't know there was an app until I started digging into it. All I'd seen was a YouTube advert for it. Because the first thing I heard was obviously the news, Better Health campaign, that video of Boris like in a garden saying it's really important to be healthy, walking his dog or whatever it was. And then that was it. So where you talked about the obesity strategy, but you didn't know about Better Health, all I'd heard was Better Health and didn't know the obesity strategy was what the Better Health was a part of. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, I didn't know there was an app until, like you say, we started digging in. And so I don't know if, like you say, the general public knows there's an app either. It's, the NHS have got quite a few apps now. They've got like your Couch to 5K, and there's a couple of other ones, again, I didn't know were kind of in the same vein. But yeah, the app is, like I say, just fine. You got to remember, at the end of the day, it's the government guidelines, it's the NHS. I've forgotten the name of it now. What's our standard thing called? It's not My Plate, is it? It's the Eat Well plate, isn't it? That's the one.
Eat Well plate.
Yeah. So obviously, it's just the Eat Well plate, and like you said, it's based on BMI. So according to the app, I put in my height and weight, and it told me that I should aim to lose 4.1 kilos to be in the right place.
You had to lose 4.1?
Yeah.
Right.
But obviously, again, us being in the industry, we know that that's not really necessary. I mean, I know I've put a bit of like lockdown poundage on, but it's not, I need to lose 4 kilos to be healthy. It's not, that's not the case. But again, for someone who's not as familiar with things, if you just see the BMI, scale of things, you think, oh my God, I'm not healthy because they said that. But just to, give people the example they've probably heard, but just to reiterate it again, in terms of BMI, you think of a boxer or a rugby player, because they got so much weight on them, but that weight is muscle mass, their BMI would put them in the obese category, but they're obviously not. It's just because BMI is just your height relative to your weight, and that's it. It doesn't fully account for how healthy you are. It's just a rough guideline. So yeah, that's the first thing. If it's based on that, and so because it's telling you how much weight to lose based on that, it might not be a great place to start, but it's better than nothing, isn't it?
To interject as well, I don't like the argument that BMI isn't useful for getting general statistics. Like the statistics that you read out at the start will be based on BMI.
Yeah.
And I don't like the argument that those statistics or that data isn't accurate because BMI isn't entirely, because someone muscular, sort of stands against the grain of what it's saying. So I think it's valid for that on like a really large scale, but when you're talking about an individual, and what action they individually should take, then BMI just isn't individual. Like, it doesn't take enough individual characteristics of a person to give them an individual roadmap for what they should be doing, or target, or even to their status that you're obese or that you're not. So I agree, not the best place to start there.
No, but like you said, so BMI actually is supposed to be used for statistics. It was initially developed as a way to get statistics on, I think it was school children initially, just because you could churn it out. It wasn't difficult. You could just pop the thing on the kid's head, pop the kid on the scale. The kid didn't even know like what the weight was. It was just for statistics, and it was quick. And so in that way, it is quick. It does get a broad kind of result, but it's still fairly relevant and representative. But in the example that I just gave, that are obviously going to be exceptions to the rule. But broadly speaking, it still gives you a rough idea on the sort of nationwide level of what's going on. But when you get down to your level, you got to think about things a little bit differently. Which, like I said, in my case, I'd probably don't need to lose 4 kilos to suddenly be healthy or classed as healthy. Do you know what I mean? So obviously then from there, the app breaks down what I should do to lose those 4.1 kilos. And it was from this point it started to kind of concern me, I think is probably the best way to put it. So the general advice it gave on sort of day one or week one, I think it is, it's got to split into maybe 8 or 12 weeks. And then it gives you different bits of advice on week one, couple of tips on week 2, couple of different tips on week 3. So it is kind of like a habit builder, if you like, but it is also trying to help you in terms of tracking your calories and keeping an account on your calorie intake. Because the first thing it said was that to lose that weight, that 4.1 kilos for me, I should aim to eat no more than 1,900 calories a day. And it also said that, but that wasn't me, that was men, just all of them. And it also said that women should aim for no more than 1,400 calories a day to lose weight. Yeah.
Whoa.
That's shocking.
So, just to be clear on that, you don't get a calorie goal for yourself.
No. It just
says men should aim for 1,900 in order to lose that much weight.
It just says, yeah, I think it actually said in order to lose weight at a healthy rate, men should aim for 1,900 calories, no more. Women should aim for no more than 1,400. Yeah.
There's so many.
I know there's a lot to go into it with that. And again, like,
what's wrong there?
Listeners, you know, if you're not like a PT listening to the podcast, the reason me and Jim are kind of smirking to each other, you know, if you're listening, if you're not watching, you can't see us, we're kind of smirking at each other because, like we were just saying with the BMI example, once you get to an individual, everything's individual. So while you can use BMI on a broad scale, once you get to a single person, you can't just say everybody needs 1,900 calories to lose weight. That's just not the way it works anymore, because the amount of energy you need to keep you alive is dependent on how much of you there is, to put it simply. So say, for example, you weigh 200 kilos. Every single cell in your body needs energy to function. And so somebody at 200 kilos needs way more energy just to live on each day than somebody who's 100 kilos. And now they would both lose weight if they suddenly at 1,900 kilos, but the person who was on 200 kilos to start with would feel awful because they'd be nowhere near kind of the energy they just need to function every day. And that's kind of an extreme example.
And they'd lose,
you know, yeah, and you'd lose it a lot faster. So where the app says to lose it at a good rate, at a healthy rate of weight loss, again, that's relative to what your starting point is. So
how can you say that it would be healthy for you to eat that many calories and lose that much weight when clearly someone that's twice as heavy is going to lose a lot more weight at like a sort of a much more rapid pace? So there's no way to say that that's healthy. It's just not that any sense.
No. Yeah, it's wild. Like, you know, it is. I want to give things positives. Do you know what I mean?
I know, yeah, no.
So I've actually got the notes on that. So at a safe and sustainable rate is what the exact words were. And that's defined as 1 to 4 pounds a week for anyone, 1 to 4 pounds a week, or 1/2 to 2 kilos a week, which, yeah, like that's fine. Even 4 pounds a week is quite fast. But like you said, even 1/2 pound a week, I often have to remind people, is still quite a good rate of weight loss when you think of things long term. But yeah, obviously, like you say, when you get to the individual who's starting at 90 kilos, individual who's starting at 180 kilos, that rate is completely different. And then they seem to have meals to kind of try and help you hit that. But it's not kind of split in the way that obviously the Nutri-iQ app is, where whatever meals you choose, they're relative to your individual calorie requirements. It's just, here's some healthy meals, and it tells you how many calories they are. So you can kind of shuffle things around and roughly aim for 1,900 or 1,400, whatever they want you to aim for. And the apps are quite good. You know, the meals look nice. And like I said, there are other apps as well to help you sort of get more active, because obviously some of the tips in the overall Better Health app are about being more active. So you've got the Couch to 5K app, which I'm using now to improve my running and my calf strength in my running. There's an Active 10, which is kind of an app to help you be more active throughout the day. just get an active 10 minutes in here, go for a 10-minute walk, do 10 minutes of squats and star jumps, little things like that. So it gives you kind of little alerts and little ideas of simple things you can do, which I think is quite a good idea as well. Another NHS one is a smoke-free one. So want to coach you through quitting smoking. There's drink-free days NHS app as well. So similar one to help you, cut back on drinking. So there are a lot of apps that I didn't know existed from the NHS. And, maybe that other thing that I mentioned of expanding the services available through the NHS, maybe part of that is just making people aware that these things exist, because they are like good little things, that could help.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing as well, is that like active stuff is so much easier. Because you don't have to be so specific. And like those little apps there, like say, brilliant for getting people moving and just making people active. And that doesn't need to really be managed so specifically on an individual level. It's, I think, where this is really where you're sort of going to start to pull it apart is the generalizations.
Yeah.
A lot of the problem, and again, like I don't just want to always be super negative about it. I think it's brilliant that this is being done at all. It's a massive step forward. Yeah. What's that? Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just agreeing with you.
Oh, yes. So, but the issue we've always had with government guidelines is that it has always been very general. And obviously you can't like just hire a PT for everyone in the country. But I think they've got to meet somewhere in the middle or find some way of, shameless plug, but like Nutri-iQ, some way of taking anybody, it doesn't matter who it is, and giving them a tool to make it easy to be specific for that person. But also teaching that person the principles, which is what we focus a lot on as well. And that's going to take, I think, from the government a lot more than an app, like just that app. It's going to take, again, like what we've done when we built Nutri-iQ. It wasn't just like how do we build a tool that people can use? It was born from the idea of the question of how do you actually teach people how to live that way? And that's the way that they, I think, need to be looking at it or thinking about it, is not how do we make the best tool, but how do we teach people to be able to do it for themselves, and then give them a tool that actually makes that easy to do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, like there's general tips and bits of advice. And every so often you might read one that you think, oh right, yeah, that's handy. But for example, one of the general tips and advice was cut back on pastries. That's it. Everyone knows that. Do you know what I mean? Like a lot of the time, this stuff is just information, and it's like, I know I should cut back on pastries, but what are you gonna do about it? It's like, what does that do for someone? That's kind of the thing. The government guidelines often do, but it's giving people like tactics to do those things, at least as a next step. I think, rather than just saying, cut back on this, it's how do you start cutting back on that? And like you said, that can obviously be a bit harder for the government on a nationwide level. But, if you start getting in, talking to, again, like people like us, like people like running things like Nutri-iQ who are with people on the ground, then, if you use those people more, they can help you do that. But yeah, and the general tips are like, the general advice is relevant. It is accurate for things like exercise. So the advice was get 150 minutes of activity throughout the week. And it actually said, which surprised me, do strength training twice a week. And I don't think I've ever actually seen that from government recommendations before to do strength training. It's all because it always just seems to be get out on your bike, get in the park, go for a walk, get running. Like you never really hear them telling you to do strength training. And I think that is the first time I've heard that. I don't know about you.
Yeah, definitely. Like I say, you always hear the same stuff. Just the generic get out for a run, get out for a walk, get your steps, be more active. But I've never heard that from any kind of government initiative.
Yeah.
It's cool.
So yeah, that's it. So there is an app basically. We've talked about it. It's not fantastic. The other thing was tracking. So it wants to help you track your progress. So it wants you to, and we talked about this, and I didn't quite understand what it meant. It wants you to track your weight and your waist at the start and the end of every week. And when I first read that, I said to Jim, "Isn't that the same? Like if the start of the week is Monday, and then you measure it at the end of week one on Sunday, and then you do the start of week two on Monday, what's the point?" Because you just do it like doing it next to each other.
Just do it 2 days ago.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they mean something else, but I don't know. It just made me laugh because I couldn't understand it in my brain. And yeah, like I said, general advice: break up inactivity, be more active, keep a track of your calories, aim to hit your 5 a day. It's all, good stuff. It's all what you should be doing. But there's just not enough on it yet to get you into doing that full time, if you like. But anyone that's downloaded the app and is using the app and is maybe kind of seeing things in a different light, because obviously me and Jim we're used to seeing it from our side. But if you're from the other side of things and you've started using it to try and help you manage your weight, let us know what that's like. Let us know if it is more useful than we're making out, because sometimes we can kind of fall into that as trainers. We can kind of fail to see the wood for the trees because we've got so much kind of info in our heads of what all this stuff is, when it could be enough. So yeah, let us know. Again, shoot us that email to Shaun at nutri-iq.net, or drop us a tweet. Let us know what your thoughts are on the app, or get it and let us know what your thoughts are. The next thing on the Better Health campaign itself is, again, something that we said we've both seen, which are the adverts. So I've started seeing the billboards now as well. I don't know if you have while you're out and about. No? So yeah, the first thing I saw was a video advert on YouTube. But now I've started seeing billboards up around town saying like, let's do this. This is what I'm doing now. I used to do this. Now I do this. And the thing I've noticed on it, which is a big topic in itself, and I don't know what the right answer is that I've noticed that all of the sort of models, if you like, the people on the adverts are all very big people, which again isn't something I've really seen before. But maybe that means this is a good thing, because you tend to see adverts for people like trying to get you to lose weight of people who are in shape.
Yeah.
But obviously there's a lot more going on now in terms of sort of being seen in the media, feeling that you're represented is the word I was looking for. Like when there was that mannequin last year that Nike brought out, and everyone lost their minds. And it's just that kind of thing again. And like I say, maybe that's the right thing to do, because then you'll sort of familiarize yourself with the person you're looking at. I don't know.
I think so. That stood out to me as well. I haven't seen any adverts without looking for them.
Yeah.
I only saw the adverts that were on the page when I found the page through doing the search. But that was something that immediately stuck out to me. It was that it was just normal people, and some of them were sort of bigger. So they obviously are not going with the tactic of do this to look like this. They're going with, we all should be doing this. Like, it doesn't matter where you're at, everyone's different stage in the journey.
Yeah.
Crack on. let's do it. And I like it. I think it's a good idea. I don't like there was all that uproar with the mannequin, but I don't think that's any different. I think that's the same. Like when they obviously did it as a fashion thing, but that's how they sell their clothes, and their clothes are activewear. And you should be encouraged to be able to go out and buy activewear, regardless of where you're at in your journey. I think that's important. So. Yeah, no, I like it. I think, like I say, it stood out to me. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, like I say, I think it's just interesting and to wondering, like, is this the right way to go with it? Because you've never seen it before, and like you said, those stats are still going up. So maybe that's not obviously the right thing to do. So maybe this way people will sort of resonate with the people they're seeing in the adverts and think, yeah, well, if they're doing it and they're doing good things now, then I can do it as well. Like just last week, my mum is working to lose weight, and we were sitting in the garden, and all of a sudden, my mum just goes, "Fuck off!" I was like, "Whoa, what's happened?" And she was looking on her phone, and she was on a shopping website. She was looking for some clothes, and she was on the plus size section, and she was just like, no, like they are not plus size. Like they were showing it. I think it might even say like the plus size section went from like 14 to 20. And she was like, I still only fit into them. So how is that even plus size? And the people on this, like, they're still tiny. Do you know what I mean? And you hear about that a lot. People saying like plus size as it's defined by fashion is just not plus size. So it's probably a similar kind of thing for these adverts that they're doing now.
I know it's another point of and I'm guessing we're going to get into this a bit more with the advertising thing, but it's a fight. The whole thing is a fight against capitalism. Yeah. Not obviously against capitalism, but the idea of capitalism is that they do what they need to do
to make the money,
to sell, to make the money, and this is the struggle is that the government now, that the actions that they're starting to take is pretty much directly against that, where companies are taking advantage of certain types of advertising and certain ways of advertising, and how they represent certain people or sizes of clothes and stuff. So yeah, I think it's a really weird one. I think it's going to be a bit of a uphill, definitely going to be an uphill battle.
Yeah. Like
but that's a big part of the conversation, is that you essentially just fighting capitalism.
Yeah, trying to come up against the money is like, it takes us back to the Olympics 2012, sponsored by McDonald's. What? like it's crazy, and it's things like that that need to stop happening, because obviously it's one of them. People say, oh, but McDonald's doesn't make you overweight, and it's like, no, but they drive you to eat a lot of calories. So if they just existed, then yeah, probably not. Like if they were just a bland corner shop, maybe they wouldn't have such an impact. But they are like the biggest company in the world in many ways. They've got more retail units than any other company and things like that. So they definitely are having an impact. And obviously there's all the adverts, and it's things like I said, with companies taking advantage of certain types of advertising. The fact that if somebody goes do, you're thinking of Mackey's. Do you know what I mean? Straight away. Or if somebody says, did somebody say, you go, just eat. Like it's in your head, like you can't get away from it. But even just those two words that I've just like thought of, because we said obviously these adverts are driving you to eat more. Did somebody say? And then your head goes, just eat. You're like, ah.
It's mad when you think about it.
Yeah, it does just get into your brain. And this is what I was saying right at the start. Don't try your best not to feel bad for being overweight or for struggling to lose weight, because the world around you is doing so much to try and make you that way and keep you that way. Like Jim said, all for the sake of making money out of you. it's not your fault you're like that. It's not your fault you've ended up that way. And, you know, like you said, like it's an uphill battle. We're all in this together to try and fix it and to try and make everybody healthier and keep everybody alive for longer, you know, when you really get down to it, and enjoy that life for longer, you know, without, you know, be more free from illness and disease along the way. Like I said, it's an uphill battle. But what we're just talking about there probably is a good place to jump over to the shops. So one of the things that the obesity strategy is looking to tackle is food promotion and placement for foods that are high in fat, sugar, and salt, which are collectively HFSS, to think HFSS. So yeah, in shops, they're looking to restrict or ban potentially buy one, get one free deals on foods that are high in fat, sugar, and salt. And again, like we mentioned before, change the placement of them so that they're less likely to catch your eye as a promotion to make you think, oh, we should get that, even though you don't really need it. Because again, this is just the way supermarkets work, as well as the food companies. They know where to put things and how to put them there to make you buy more. Because again, they're just out to make the money at the end of the day. What are your thoughts on the promotion side of things?
Yeah. Well, this is it that we was just talking about there, isn't it? Where they are directly starting to tackle their companies now and just say you can't do it. I think it's a difficult one because it's kind of a slippery slope. But I mean, we've talked about in previous podcasts, I think when we did the one on the restaurant with the calorie, like working off your calories, that restaurant thing.
Yeah.
We talked about we talked about this topic specifically and smoking and how that progressed. The sort of fight against advertising for smoking, and it continues now.
Yeah.
I think that it's necessary because we do live in a world that is ran by big company, and if they are just allowed to if they're just allowed to do whatever they want and it's at the detriment of the public, then they will do it to make the money. And that doesn't, you know, people obviously think of like those companies then as being monstrous or like ran by demons. But actually it's just like, that's just their job. That's what they're there to do. And there's so many different moving parts in that that's what they have to do just like to get by. And the people who work in those companies depend on that to happen. So if it's left to the company to say, oh, well, actually, I know we were up 50% this year, but obesity seems to be on the rise because of it. They're not going to go, oh, well, let's bring it back a little bit. We was doing all right last year anyway. Let's just go back to how it was. So I feel like it's necessary. It's uncomfortable, and any kind of for me, any kind of like allowing the government to dictate things that strictly is uncomfortable. But like the smoking thing, it's necessary in some places, and I feel like this is one of them.
Yeah. Yeah, because part of it as well, and I'm not sure if that was for this campaign or if this was for some other time, maybe probably Jamie Oliver, to be honest. It was probably Jamie Oliver thing, is making like kids' food less visually appealing, like on the packets and things like that. You know, we're talking about getting rid of characters on cereal boxes, things like that, because it just, like, again, it gets it in your head that this food is something you should have in your body, and it's going to be exciting to do that. It's going to be fun to do that. When at the end of the day, like these are thought processes that, you know, me and Jim as coaches have to try and later in life coach out of people. You know, this food that you're putting in your body, like enjoy it, and, you know, go to a restaurant and really savor the flavors and things like that. But having these kind of emotional responses or expected emotional responses, like, you know, you've learned those from being a little kid, and it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah.
You know, like you're saying, the way, you know, smoking packaging went from being all bright and jazzy to everything looking the same. Why not do that for food? Because at the end of the day, you don't need to smoke, so don't have big flashy things to try and sell more of it. And obviously you need to eat, but you don't need to have all of these different versions of the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, like, you've got Frosted Flakes from Aldi and you've got Frosties from Kellogg's, and the boxes are the same color but look a bit different. So why not just make them look a little bit more similar? And then you might actually start to do it based on what you actually enjoy rather than what you're being sold. Do you know what I mean? You know, it could start to get to that. It's the thing that makes me
I
laugh with
think
food as well, like that. Go on.
it could kind of be balanced in the same way as, you know, if you as a personal trainer were training a client, you wouldn't say to them, you know, go home and take up, you know, anything in your cupboards that is classed as unhealthy and throw it in the bin and then never buy that again. You would teach them that those things aren't the devil, but that they will get in the way of what that person is trying to achieve if they don't do it with control or don't do it according to a system. And I think it's the same for this. Like you say, you should definitely not be like banning things, like ban McDonald's, ban Subway. Obviously not. Same with smoking. But like you said before, it should just exist. So if you want to have it, you're educated on risks. If there are risks, you're educated on how to enjoy those things in moderation. And it's there if you want it.
Yeah.
That's how it should be. But at the moment, like I say, because it's been forced down your throat, and obviously the, you know, advertising is finding better ways to force it down your throat. That's the whole idea.
Yeah.
So it's got to be regulated in some way.
Yeah.
And it is sad that you are, and obviously I'm guessing we're going to transition onto this next about the sort of watershed for advertising foods. Is that the you know, kids are conditioned to feel a certain way about foods, and when they're older, then it flips. So you become an adult, and the narrative flips, and then you're a bad person for thinking the way that you've been conditioned to think through that, through those messages. So you're sort of fighting a losing battle.
Yeah. Yeah, that, like you said, probably a good time to move over to the adverts. And as we're talking about it, and as we're on the topic of kids being conditioned to think a certain way about food and drinks and how it's going to make them feel to have it, and that it's fun to have it and it's cool to have it, you know, again, back to the way they basically pitched smoking to people back in the day, that it was fun and cool to smoke.
Some of those old adverts, by the way, just incredible.
Yeah.
So good.
Wild. And I wonder, you know, if the way we look back on adverts for smoking back in the day and think it's mad that they used to like promote smoking in that way. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if 50 years from now, people are looking back going, isn't it mad how they used to advertise food? It's just food. Why were they making such a big deal out of it? You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case then. But yeah, so at that point of what they're looking to do is to ban junk or foods that are high in fat, sugar, and salt, adverts for those kinds of foods on TV and online before 9 p.m. So again, there's two things for this. And there was one really interesting thing I read. A comment from somebody was, okay, yeah, like, stop conditioning the kids to want this stuff, but you're still conditioning the parents who buy the stuff. So how much of a difference does that really make? Obviously, kids will nag you to death to get it, but if you're already in that routine of buying that stuff, just because the kids stop nagging you to buy Twixes in the weekly shop doesn't mean you'll stop.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So again, it's adjusting the environment so that it's not so in your face all the time, which is good. But what are you going to do at the same time to, help people adjust those daily routines and those daily habits so that you get the actual desired result?
Yeah.
Well,
I mean? I'm tempted to say it's a good step.
Yeah, they're all good steps. Yeah, what comes next?
But then I immediately just think, well, why are we taking steps? Like, if you've acknowledged that is a good thing to do, then why are you only doing it at half measure like that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Again, and I guess it is like obviously money talks, but yeah, I mean, I just feel like if you're gonna do that, do it properly.
Yeah, the question I've got on it is something I wrote down here. What about billboards and bus stops? Because realistically, and this is something we've talked about before in terms of the business sense, like adverts is, you want to put an advert where somebody's attention is, and nobody's attention is on television adverts anymore, because as soon as the TV advert comes on, everybody goes, okay, down to my phone and look at this instead. Like, nobody even sees what's on the TV adverts anymore. Either that, or they've recorded the TV show beforehand and they skip it when the adverts come on. So, like, how likely are you to even see those?
This I'll well, I don't have Sky or anything like that. I use like Netflix. So first of all, Netflix most of the time. So
no adverts anyway.
Secondly, if I'm on normal TV, like digital TV or whatever it is, and I'm watching something, advert comes on, I just flick around on my TV. Like if I don't go to my phone, I literally just get the TV guide up, flick around a little bit until I can hear that the adverts are finished, and then go back off it. Like it's like you do everything to get away from that.
Yeah. I've just thought there that, maybe that in itself is a reason to do this, so that the kids aren't being conditioned, because we do that. We look at our phone straight away. But, a kid that's super susceptible to things, who's like 4, 5, 6, who doesn't have a phone to go and look at, who isn't going to skip the adverts because the mum's doing something else, making a cup of tea or whatever, they're just going to sit and watch it. Maybe it does make sense then. I hadn't thought of that until just now.
Yeah, and well, but then you also kind of think, well, if a lot of people don't watch adverts, and I can't imagine that for a company putting out adverts on TV is good compared to Google or Facebook.
Exactly.
So you obviously would get the backlash from the companies, like, well, you're just pulling the carpet from under our feet. But they've got other much more effective sources of advertising to go to do that.
Yeah.
So I don't feel, again, it's kind of like, well, why are you doing this half measure?
Yeah.
People don't watch the bloody adverts anyway. Companies can put out adverts in places that are more effective for them. Just do it. Just get rid of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, there are other areas that are more effective: Facebook ads, Google ads. And that is something that was also mentioned, banning those adverts online before 9 p.m. And it's like, how do you do that? Like, how do you get Google or Facebook to suddenly somehow change or make a big adjustment to their algorithms that stop those? Like, America is having enough trouble getting them to stop putting out like political ads, like against, and even here as well, like there was all stuff here recently, like people are struggling enough to get them to stop putting out like false information ads to brainwash people. Like, how are you going to get them to control to do that? Like, I feel like it's very unlikely. And the way you see the videos from like the American Congress where they're interviewing Zuckerberg, and like the old white dudes in Congress are like, so can you tell me, Mr. Zuckerberg, why somebody can tweet at me and that's not regulated. And he's like, well, that's Twitter. I'm Facebook. And I'm just anticipating those things happening here and it being even funnier because we can relate more. Yeah, I can't wait to see those.
It's the thing that, people think about Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that as almost like its own little government.
Yeah.
Or it's so big that it's seen as a part of society, but again, it's just another big company. So asking them not to advertise for huge companies that probably pour millions into Facebook ads or Google ads or whatever is not any different to asking McDonald's itself to do less advertising or sell less food. So I think, yeah, you're right. They're going to have just as difficult a job trying to regulate that. But yeah, regulating a company like Facebook or Twitter, I think they're going to have a much harder job.
Yeah, 100%.
And there's a whole thing at the minute. I don't want to dwell too much on this, but there's a whole thing about free speech on Twitter and stuff at the minute, and people getting banned. And really, it's the same debate. Like you kind of go into that company and saying you need to stop so and so from saying you need to stop this company from advertising. It's not obviously it's not a straightforward measure, but it's something that I think needs to be worked on. It's going to have to get that way.
Yeah. Just to jump back to the food promotion, like the stuff in the shops that we were talking about before, because we didn't quite cover these topics. A big thing that people have criticized is that tackling and looking to get rid of buy one get one free deals on foods that are high in sugar, fat, and salt, that will hit poorer families worse. And this is it's a massive topic, and to be honest, something that I had never really thought about or put much thought into until it kind of came in front of me. I think I was listening to a podcast and it came up a couple of years ago. But the fact that in terms of food and food economy, like poorer families are hit worse. Like poorer areas in cities always have higher rates of obesity and also happen to have higher frequencies and like sort of location densities of fast food restaurants. And like I say, all these buy one get one free deals, it is cheaper a lot of the time to buy things that will feed your family but aren't as nutritious. And that in itself is a huge problem. And there's even a thing called food deserts, which again I didn't know existed until a couple of years ago. And a food desert is basically an area where access to a supermarket that sells fruit and veg in a decent enough supply, you don't live within a certain number of miles of that. And again, food deserts all exist in poorer areas of cities. I think the top 10, when I was reading it, 3 or 4 were actually in Liverpool, and I was like, what? Like,
really?
Like in Liverpool, 3 or 4 of the worst hit, as they call it, food deserts are in Liverpool of the whole country, and that's like crazy. We've got some areas in the city. Me and Jim both live in Liverpool, by the way, for listeners who don't know that. And we're kind of aware of the fact that there's some areas that aren't as well off, but you don't think of it like to that level. Like you don't think of the repercussions of that. And as a listener, just think about it. Think about the areas of your city in terms of how many fast food restaurants there are and fast food outlets. That could be McDonald's, KFC, Subway, and then also your little just corner takeaway, the pizza place, the Chinese, all of them. Just have a little think about it to yourself, and you'll probably realize quite quickly that in the more well-off areas, there's restaurants. In the less well-off areas, there's all of that. And all of that is probably higher in calories and cheaper. So it's no surprise that people who are in those poorer communities end up being more overweight. And again, that just makes me sad. like as if people don't have enough to deal with having to struggle for money and to feed your family full stop, but also the stuff that you are able to feed your family is going to make them unhealthy.
Yeah, and then along comes the government, and I think you just kind of touched on it right at the start of this podcast. Yeah. Why are we making the bad foods more expensive rather than making good foods cheaper and more accessible?
Exactly.
Doesn't really seem to make any sense at all. But and again, I'm gonna do your job for you here, Shaun. Transition us to another topic, which was the eat out to help out.
Yeah.
Which seems to be put in completely the wrong place. Like, I get that the main thing of eat out to help out is that you're helping businesses.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, then don't do it for massive billion-dollar businesses. It doesn't make any sense. Secondly, make healthy foods more accessible to people by doing it for wholesalers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Where you could use the exact same principle to encourage people to go and get whole foods and fresh veg and all that good stuff for half the price, and the government will make the difference.
Yeah.
Rather than being able to go to Subway and get that for half price and the government make up the difference. What is going on there?
Do you know what? I've not even thought of that, but that's such a good point. That's crazy. Why not at least do both? Subsidize the price of healthy food, and at the same time as giving people this app that's going to tell them to cook meals with those foods. Because again, then that brings us to the whole thing, that we've posted about on social media recently. People often feel that eating healthier is more expensive. So if the government wants people to eat more healthy meals, more fresh home cooked meals, things like that, then make that easier for them. Don't just give them the recipe, make it cheaper, because that's the biggest obstacle people have. And if you can subsidize McDonald's to change my 99p cheeseburger to a 49p cheeseburger, pretty sure you can subsidize Aldi to subsidize a £1 big bag of apples to a 50p big bag of apples. Do you know what I mean? Because that makes such a huge impact
so much more
to
sense.
People's weekly shop. And I've never thought about that, but that's just blowing my mind that that's not a thing that's happening.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah,
it's mental.
Wow,
it's just completely backwards. It's hard to put words to it.
Yeah.
It would be. I don't think I would have thought of this point if they weren't doing the Better Health Initiative at the same time.
Yeah.
So if they'd have just said, all right, well, eat out to help out, it's 50% off at these places, I probably would have been like, well, I mean, do you really need to give it to Mackey's and Subway? Is that really necessary? But the fact that they're running this health campaign at the same time is just the biggest kind of kick in the teeth, really, about the whole thing. Just doesn't make sense. It's completely self-opposing.
Just before we go into the point we've got on restaurants and stuff, while we're still on the point of, rather than increasing the price of junk food, when you bring down the price of whole foods, I just want to bring people's attention to something called the National Food Strategy, which seems to be about that, which is aiming to reduce the price of healthier foods to aid in the obesity strategy. But the main thing I wanted to bring people's attention to, that I don't know if everybody is aware of, but again, with us being in the industry, we're the ones that see this stuff being shared. Not to bring politics into it, even though basically this whole episode is about politics, what I'm talking about. yeah, obviously Brexit is a thing that's happening. Whether you like it or not, I don't care. But something that's happening or potentially could happen as a result of that is the quality of our food standards ramping down. So if things continue to go the way they're going and we don't course correct it, basically our food market could become open to the United States. And if you've watched any documentaries on Netflix, like Cowspiracy and all that stuff, and you've heard about like hormone-filled beef and chlorinated chicken and hormones in milk and antibiotics in milk as a result of the hormone-filled beef and all that, we spend a lot of time telling people to ignore that because that's in America and that doesn't apply here because our food standards are much higher. However, with what's going on, we might not be able to say that anymore, because if this happens, if our food market opens up to the United States, all that crap will be coming here, and we don't want that. So what you can do as a listener, if you haven't already, there are petitions to the government to try and avoid this and to try and make sure this doesn't happen. Because again, like this whole episode, this whole episode, I was talking really serious then and then I just ruined it. This whole episode is all about making the country healthier and making all of us healthier. And if we're trying to do that and then all of a sudden we get this just bottom quality food coming in, it's just going to make the whole thing pointless. So I'm going to post the links to those petitions if they're still open, that is, because it's been a little while since I checked. Obviously, I signed it. I'm pretty sure I've seen like shares from Jim and other ones of our friends signing them as well. Yeah, I'll put the links to them in the description, into the show notes of the podcast, so that you as a listener can go and sign that petition as well. You know, assuming you do want to avoid chlorinated chicken and hormone-filled beef. So scroll down now before you even listen anymore and do that for us, and then come back and listen to the rest. Okay, moving on.
Nice.
Right. So then, yeah, bringing us over back to the restaurant side of things. So the calories on menus, which some people, this is going to actually bring us back to something you mentioned before, which was episode 1 of the podcast, which was us looking at the TV show, The Restaurant That Burns Off Calories. So in that, they took people into a restaurant, everybody had their food. At the same time, in the back of the restaurant, there was a bunch of people on treadmills and bikes and row machines burning off the calories that they ate. And what they did at the end was basically showed the people who'd been eating how long it would take for them to burn off the food they just eaten, which was a whole thing in itself that didn't make a lot of sense. And it's not the way things work. So don't even start to think like that. If you want to know more about all that, though, go back and listen to episode 1 because it was really good and we talked about loads of interesting stuff. It links quite closely to this because we did talk about the environment and things like that as well. So if you want to listen to that, go back, listen to episode 1. Again, I'll put the notes for it in the description, or you can just type it into your browser. Go to nutri-iq.net/podcast-001 and you can find it there. But yeah, so calories on menus, the government is looking to make it mandatory, I think, for businesses with a certain amount of employees. I think it's more than, is it more than 20 or 200? So I think it's basically more in the chains. I think it was probably 200 because you could have a decent sized restaurant with 20. Yeah, so for bigger restaurants, you've got to, they want them to start putting the calorie content of the meals on the menus so that people who are eating out and about can still keep that awareness of what they've had, which I think is a good idea because, like I said, Nutri-iQ, our app itself, is based on the basics of calorie balance, making sure you're eating the right amounts day to day. And an issue with that people often struggle with is eating out and knowing how much they've had when they go out to have something to eat or when they order in a takeaway. You know, that's why we're building little cheat sheets at the minute so you can get an idea of what your takeaway might have been or what your meal out might have been. But if it's right there on the menu, it just makes your life easier as far as I'm concerned. I don't know what you think, Jim.
I agree. I think that it's, we've got to kind of be a little bit careful, and again, it's where education comes into it, because you know you have to be educated on what that means. If the education doesn't come with that, then what you just basically get is people, like faux paring a certain recipe amount on a meal,
Yeah.
and then not having that meal because it has that many calories, as to being able to say, just that's how many calories are in it. Okay, well, I want to have it because that's what I like. So I can then take that number and use it to make sure that the rest of my sort of calories for the day or week are on point for, for my journey. So the education is important, but I think as an idea, it's not, I don't think it's just a good idea. I think it's essential, because when you go to restaurants, I think a lot of people are going to be very, very surprised to see the numbers that pop up on those menus.
Yeah.
And I think doing it for bigger companies is a good idea as well, because smaller companies, I always feel like kind of forcing small companies to do stuff is a bit harsh.
Yeah.
But
Like, it's hard enough to be a small
yeah,
business.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like independent businesses, forcing them all to redo their menus and calculate their calories, and maybe even have to redo the food in their menus,
Yeah. Yeah.
because they're going to have to display their calories. But they'll do it anyway over time, because people will just get used to being able to see it.
Yeah.
So I think making it mandatory for big companies to do it is a good idea, and
Yeah.
not for small ones immediately, but they'll follow suit kind of just in their own time.
Yeah.
And then it will just become the norm. It'll just be what people do, what people expect. And I think that it's a desensitization to it as well, having it there all the time. It won't become, I don't feel like it will become an obsession for people. I feel like it will become just a really normal thing, that
Yeah.
the calories are there, and you hopefully over time people will just start to understand how to use that information,
Yeah.
rather than just being scared of it.
Yeah. Like you said there, hopefully it won't become an obsession, and it shouldn't. But it's probably worth mentioning that that is sort of one of the criticisms of this point that I saw online. There was a big article, it's probably BuzzFeed or something, or it might have been a HuffPost one, kind of like a contributor article, basically saying this was a terrible idea because, and it said in this thing, like, this isn't true. Again, like Jim said, it's situation, it's context. But this article said they definitely shouldn't do this because it's known that counting calories causes eating disorders. And the way they've said that is, it's one of those things, it's not totally incorrect, but it's also quite incorrect. It's kind of like looking at it from two angles. So a lot of people who develop anorexia do so through counting calories. However, not everybody who counts calories develops anorexia. So you can't really say that counting calories causes anorexia and it
It's
causes
just
eating disorders. You know what I mean? It's,
talking in absolutes. It's
yeah, it often
never.
plays a part, but
Yeah.
with the right education and even like with the right, living in the right culture, like the right sort of social pressure, like a lot of eating disorders, I think more so come from your relationship with food and your relationship, like your self-esteem and like the relationships with the people around you and the social pressures of, you should be a certain way, kind of all of that put together goes towards that. Just like all these things we're talking about go towards obesity. It's not that a single act of counting calories is going to make you anorexic or make you bulimic or something like that. Yeah, it can be part of the puzzle, but counting calories can also be part of the solution to managing your weight, effectively and in a good way. So, I think I just wanted to sort of point that out. Like, that has been a criticism, but I don't really think it's a valid criticism for that reason. But like you rightly said, I think a lot of people will be surprised when they first see the numbers and think, "Whoa, I didn't realize there was this much in that." But then again, if you can educate people properly, if it's somebody who goes out to eat quite often or does get quite a lot of takeaways and they've been struggling to manage their weight and thinks they've been doing everything right, that might be the penny that finally drops for them to go, oh, now that I've seen the number, it makes sense, you know.
Yeah. And I think it's just managing that reaction as well. Like the part of the education that's important is so that when someone looks at the menu, the point's not for them to look at it and be like, oh man, I'm like, that's more than I thought. I'm never going to have it again. The point is for them to look at it and go, oh wow, that's more than I thought. So what do I need to do to make sure that I can have it and still hit my goals, or still, be on target for my calories for the week or whatever it is. And that's a whole part of the culture and just, again, how we're conditioned to think. We're always just kind of taught calories, high calories is bad calories, as opposed to, at the end of the day, what really matters is where the numbers stand on average over the week. And that's obviously a long just to teach the general public that. But, if all of my clients understand that and work on that basis, live their life on that basis, then over a few generations, it's possible to teach a country how to think that way as well.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that way. I'm not saying my way is the way, but everyone can learn if we can figure out the best way for people to understand how to live and maintain a healthy lifestyle, a healthy body. If it's possible to teach one person, then it is possible to teach a nation that.
Yeah.
But it's big steps and a bit of patience. It's going to take some bravery from the government to stand up to big companies and to really invest in making that happen.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
there's only a couple more points that we've got on things. There's a couple of things we can't really comment on because we don't really have the information of what it means. Like, for example, expanding the services available through the NHS to help you manage your weight. I didn't really get much on what that means. It's quite an open topic. It could be anything. I mean, one of the things, for example, that is also part of the Better Health campaign is, and I definitely want to get in on as Nutri-iQ, is the NHS recommending certain diets, Weight Watchers, Slimming World. I'm pretty sure Rosemary Conley was on there. So yeah, there's a few things like that they are recommending. You might want to try this. Like I said, I want us to try and get in on that somehow as well. So if anybody's got connections to MPs or to the health secretary or something that they can, just put a little word in for us, do that.
That'd be sweet.
Because that's why we do everything. We do what we do. We created Nutri-iQ. We do this podcast, Nutri-iQ Radio, to try and help everybody everywhere, as many people as we can, just to get healthier. And if we could get in front of people like that in the same, and to be recommended by the government, like Weight Watchers is, like, that would be huge. Because I mean, obviously we're biased, but we feel like we could probably do a better job than some of those. I'm not going to say anyone in particular. I'm just going to say some of them and keep it vague, because then I feel like we're covered legally.
Yeah, I think some of those companies are just there because they're big, and the government aren't looking at what they're actually doing. And I think, again, I'm not going to name any actual names, but if the government was to look into the actual statistics of how many people are using the service, how many of those people are achieving their goal, how many of those people are then able to maintain that goal, and how many people, this is a very difficult statistic to get, but how many people actually form bad relationships with food because of that service and the way that it teaches them to think about foods.
Yeah.
And it's a big deal. And again, I'm not going to name any names, but there's companies on that list that are well known in our industry for teaching people or encouraging poor relationships with food. the people that use that service.
Yeah. Difficult thing with it is like the people who are doing it don't realize that they're forming a bad relationship with food as they're going through it. But we speak to a lot of people who only realize that it's happened once they sort of come out of the bubble, if you like, and then they think, oh wow, like the way I was thinking about things before, now that I've kind of got a bit more of an understanding of how things actually work, I can't believe I thought that way. Like you say, it's hard to talk about these things without being specific on them. But saying that, if people were listening last week, we did a diet breakdown, which is something we do every few weeks, where we break down a diet and just lay out the facts of it, how it works, how it proposes that it gets you results, how it actually gets you results. Quick side note, it just boils down to calorie balance every time, and I tell you why that is, and it's really interesting because then you look past the smoke and mirrors and know what's really going on. Anyway, so yeah, if you want to listen to those, stay tuned for that, because where we're trying to kind of avoid the facts and the names and things like that, I get into them on those episodes, the diet breakdowns. Last week was on the keto diet. The next one of those, let me just see, I've got it in my notes. The next one of those that I'm going to be looking at is actually Weight Watchers. So again, I'm not going to be bashing Weight Watchers. I'm just going to be laying things out so that you as a listener understand what's really going on. You understand what it means when you're counting points and things like that, and how that actually gets you results in terms of how it breaks down to calorie balance. So yeah, tune in, look out for those. Subscribe to the channel wherever you're listening, obviously, if you haven't already. It's not the end of the show though. Don't tune out because I'm saying that stuff. Yeah, carry on, Jim.
Yeah, so I think that, again, another step for the government to make is to really delve into the statistics of what apps and services really are making a difference to the individual, the individuals that are using it. And also, I don't know if you was going to touch on this as well, but I've heard just kind of rumblings of like the body coach being involved with the active stuff and things like that, and things like that. I'm not sure. I'm not really sure on that. Like, if it should be a brand, if they should be kind of bringing in external brands to represent that movement. I feel like someone like him, he would get behind it anyway. I quite like what he does, but they should be really looking at these things individually and being more selective. When I look at this list, I just see some really big names, essentially, and being well known in the fitness industry, we both know very well, is not an indicator of how good your service is for people. Usually it's actually, more often than not, it's the other way around. Cut corners to make growth. A lot of them do anyway, or they use snidey tactics to get people on board, or to encourage the repeat, like say something. Oh, I'm just gonna say like Weight Watchers. The way that it's set up encourages people to keep using it, become almost kind of reliant on it. So that doesn't seem like, when you're thinking about like teaching people how to live a good life, doesn't seem like they should become reliant on what you're doing. Same like when we're coaching people PT wise, the goal is not for that client to always need us next to them. The goal is to teach them how to become self-sufficient. And so the things that are being implemented in this scheme should be the same, should be things that encourage people to be self-sufficient and to learn how to do it for themselves. So
yeah, I'm good with getting like companies involved, like, and brands, if they're good brands, like you say. Like I'm I'd be all about like Joe Wicks getting involved because I like him. Like when he first kind of came to prominence a few years ago, like as a PT, people like when his Lean in 15 books first started coming out, I remember like all the other trainers bashing on him, like, the meals are really big portions and he doesn't even mention the calorie content of the meals. And I was just like, yeah, but look how many people are doing hit workouts that weren't doing them before.
Yeah,
Look at how many people are making home cooked fresh meals that weren't doing it before. Through lockdown, look how many people were working out with their kids doing PE every Friday or whatever it was. Like that's good stuff. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
And
man.
again, it's like obviously like with Nutri-iQ, we do give people more guidance on the calorie side of thing, but if it's a couple of steps better, that's still better. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
if it's a good company and they do get people doing good things and they're not making people form bad relationships with food and things like that, like yeah, go for that. Do you know what I
yeah.
mean?
No, I'm with you
Finding
there.
the
And,
right
and
ones,
again, I'm
like you
not.
say, it's finding the right ones.
But yeah, I mean, I think really the best way that the government can do what can achieve what they're trying to achieve is to not centralize it. So having um, just an app that people are on and that is kind of a central app to all of these things will not be enough. Like it's a
Mm-hmm.
good thing to have, and I agree. And having all these tools available to people is key as well. Um, but also like regionally, it's and this is more of the thing of like the active thing. Regionally, I feel like it's really important to in each place set up different initiatives for different um, demographics.
Yeah.
Because again, you can't just have like one thing. Like again, like I like what Joe Weeks does, and exactly what you said is how I feel about him. Um, but he appeals to a certain market,
Yeah.
and so having him on board by all means, but you can't have him as a poster boy for
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
movement. Do you know what I mean? Not that I'm saying that's what they're doing either. I'm just like I'm hoping that's the way it doesn't go.
Yeah. Yeah.
It needs to be that he is a part of it, and he'll play a big part if he is because he is a massive name. But yeah, you have to speak to every demographic and you have to speak to every region. And I think that it's got to be deployed cross country, not just like the way it looks now is just, and obviously it's been put together pretty quickly, but the way it looks is just like quite basic, you
Yeah.
know. So hopefully it goes more, but hopefully it grows into
Yeah.
what it
Yeah.
needs to be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just thought that'd be funny if, like you say, talking about as if Joe Wicks was to become like the poster boy of things, rather than just having him, like you said, because you kind of need to appeal to everyone. If there was sort of like a range of sort of like fitness people that they tried to use to appeal to everybody. So you had like a Joe Wicks to appeal to just like the general middle grounders who are just just dipping the toe in, just enjoying it, and then you've got maybe on one side. More for like the girls and stuff. You've got like an Alice Living who does similar
mm,
kind of thing with hit workouts, things like that. But obviously she's a girl, she's a bit more bouncy, things like that. And then on the other side, you've got like Eddie Hall, just just like dragging chains around everywhere, like in the same like room with these two like
yeah.
little bouncy, colorful people jumping around.
Have to pick your character when you.
Yeah, like at the start of a game, like pick your character.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, cool. So that's it, really. We've talked about loads. I don't even know how long this has gone off for because we went off for a bit in the
Yeah.
middle because the thing went down. It was light outside when we started. It's now dark. I can't wait to edit this. It's gonna be so quick to edit. It's not. So yeah, let's start wrapping things up. So,
Go.
like I said, we talked about loads of things there. We talked about, again, just to give it a quick recap, the obesity strategy in general, why it's essential, why we need it, why it needs to tackle things around us, the environment, the culture around food, the way it's presented to us and all of that. We talked about the Better Health app itself and the representation within that in terms of, you know, rather than just using skinny people who look like they've been that way their whole lives, you know, using people who are more like real people in the adverts that, you know, the people that we're trying to target. We talked about expanding the services through the NHS, the calories on the menus, the food promotions in shops, how that impacts certain families differently. The US deals that hopefully don't come through. So again, make sure you sign that petition if you haven't already, if it's still active, that is. We talked about banning junk food ads at a certain time and how all that might look and why that might work and if it might work at all. And then, yeah, all that stuff we were just getting into there about the apps and everything else. So any of that, we mentioned it right at the start, but if you've got any thoughts, we want to hear them. You know, we want to know what your thoughts are on all of those topics. We want to know how you found things, you know, maybe if they've changed for you already since the Better Health campaign, if they changed since lockdown, if you've been kind of confused about launching the Eat Out to Help Out campaign at the same time as Better Health, anything at all, let us know what your thoughts are, what's swimming around in your brain. So you can either drop an email to me, which would be Shaun at nutri-iq.net, which is SHAUN at NUTRI-IQ.net, and use the subject line podcast. Let us know what you're thinking, or reach us on Twitter at Nutri-iQ official. Let us know your thoughts. Jim, anything else before we wrap up?
Nope. I think I've said enough there, bloody rambling on. I think that I just want to wrap up by saying, obviously, we've kind of picked apart a lot of the stuff, and there's a lot of negatives there, but obviously that naturally that's just kind of what we do, is look for things that could be improved.
Yeah.
But the fact that this is happening, and there's a little bit of, I've heard people say, you know, they're only doing this because of blah, 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 or they're only doing it because of this, or why does it take for that to happen, for this to happen? Just look past all that. Like, it doesn't matter. And you're right, like it shouldn't take that long, or it shouldn't take for Boris Johnson to nearly die of COVID for him to start pushing a health campaign.
Yeah.
You're right. But bloody hell, just don't get sucked into that level of politics and let it take away from the fact that this is happening, and it's a huge step forward for public health, and it's something that we've been screaming out for a long, long time. So I'm really happy that something is being done, and I'm very hopeful as well about how it will be refined and worked out in the future.
Yeah, like you say, it's good stuff, and we have picked apart a lot. In a lot of places we've said it's maybe not enough, but it's like we always say to you guys as listeners, you know, if you as an individual are trying to manage your weight, then just take it in baby steps, you know, make it more manageable. And while we'd love to see everything suddenly change, it's probably not the best way to go, because if it doesn't work for an individual, it's probably not going to work for the whole nation. So again, maybe we do as a nation just need to take baby steps. And maybe me and Jim right now are being as impatient as we're always trying to advise you not to be. So that's probably all that's happening. So yeah, it's awesome that all this is happening. We just have to see where it goes. So thanks for tuning in to Nutri-iQ Radio this week. If you could give the video a like, that will be a massive help, and make sure you subscribe to the channel too, so you don't miss out on any future videos. See you next week.
See you.